Grandpa, look at this. A politician in Israel openly disregarded a decades-old understanding and went to the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound to pray and sing religious songs, then told a reporter, the whole land of Israel was promised to the children of God. Why is it a problem, and why do they keep using that term, promised land?
That's a heavy headline, Mia. When politicians use the promised land as a political tool, they're invoking the oldest and most potent narrative in Jewish tradition. To understand the tension, we have to peel back the layers, from the ancient text to the modern conflict. The concept begins in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, also known as the Pentateuch or the 5 books of Moses. It is the foundation for Jewish law and history. The concept of the Promised Land is first mentioned in Book of Genesis, then subsequently in Book of Exodus, Book of Numbers, and Book of Deuteronomy.
What exactly is the promise made?
In Genesis 12, 13, 15, and 17, God enters a covenant, a binding agreement, with Abraham. God told him, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you." When Abraham arrived at the site of Shechem, which is situated in the central region of ancient Canaan or approximately 40 miles north of Jerusalem, God appeared to him and proclaimed, "To your offspring I will give this land." God repeated the promise on several other occasions, and further promised to Abraham when he was 99 years of age, "The whole land of Canaan, where you now reside as a foreigner, I will give as an everlasting possession to you and your descendants after you, and I will be their God." Later, this was confirmed with his son Isaac in Genesis 26, and his grandson Jacob in Genesis 28. Jacob was later renamed Israel by God, and his descendants are called the children of Israel or the 12 tribes of Israel. In other words, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are the patriarchs and ancestors of the Jewish people. In Exodus 3 and 23, God speaks to Moses, the greatest prophet in Judaism, describing the region as a land flowing with milk and honey, instructing him on how to treat the prior occupants, and setting out the borders. "I will establish your borders from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, and from the desert to the Euphrates River. I will give into your hands the people who live in the land, and you will drive them out before you. Do not make a covenant with them or with their gods. Do not let them live in your land, or they will cause you to sin against me, because the worship of their gods will certainly be a snare to you." In Deuteronomy 1, Moses commands the children of Israel, "See, I have given you this land. Go in and take possession of the land the Lord swore he would give to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to their descendants after them." Later in Deuteronomy 19, Moses told the children of Israel that if they diligently obey and love God, their territory could be expanded to the borders God had sworn to their ancestors.
But what does the land actually include? Does it have defined borders?
The Book of Numbers actually attempts to define it. In chapter 34, it outlines boundaries where the southern border begins at the wilderness of Zin, runs alongside Edom, extends south of the Dead Sea and Kadesh Barnea, and reaches the Mediterranean Sea at the Brook of Egypt. The western border is the Mediterranean Sea, the Great Sea. The northern border extends from the Mediterranean Sea to Mount Hor, then to Lebo Hamath, and ends at Hazar Enan. And the eastern border that runs south from Hazar Enan to Shepham, down to Riblah, goes along the eastern edge of the Sea of Galilee, and follows the Jordan River down to the Dead Sea.
Wait, isn't that?
Yes. Geographically speaking, the Promised Land overlaps directly with the region of Palestine.
So everyone agree that that is the land God promised to give to children of Israel forever?
Not at all. And that's a key source of the friction. In Judaism, they view it as an exclusive, eternal covenant to the Jewish people. In Christian theology, the original geographic promise is often viewed as a shadow of a much greater, eternal reality. According to the Old Testament, the first division of the Christian biblical canon, based primarily upon the 24 books of the Hebrew Bible, God made his covenant with Abraham, and the subsequent military conquest and settlement of the land under Joshua, successor of Moses, is seen as a historical realization of that promise. In the New Testament, the second division of the Christian biblical canon, the blessings of the Abrahamic covenant are extended to all nations. Consequently, all followers of Christ, Jew and non-Jew alike, are considered spiritual heirs to God's promises, viewing the ultimate promised land not as a geopolitical territory, but as the kingdom of heaven, a restoration of Eden, where believers dwell in perpetual communion with God. In Islam theology, Muslims acknowledge that God made the covenant with Abraham, known as Ibrahim in the Quran. Abraham's family tree includes both the Ishmaelite and the Israelite lineages. The Ishmaelite tribes are the descendants of Abraham's first son, Ishmael, the claimed ancestor of Arabs and of the Islamic prophet Muhammad, while the Israelite tribes are the descendants of Abraham's second son, Isaac, the claimed ancestor of Jews and Samaritans. The Quran explicitly states that the Holy Land was assigned to the children of Israel, the descendants of Jacob, the son of Isaac, and the grandson of Abraham. The Quran warns that the children of Israel would cause corruption on the earth twice. As punishment for these transgressions, God prophesies that he would send powerful servants against them who would devastate their homes and overpower them. The Quran also states that the land will be inherited by the righteous servants of God, indicating that divine favor and the right to the land are tied to obedience, faith, and righteous conduct rather than it being an exclusive, eternal birthright based solely on ethnicity.
So, God gave the promised land to the children of Israel. Did they live there in peace since then?
Far from it. Instead, the Jews have to suffer dispersion due to successive exiles from their homeland that span nearly 3,000 years. This historical scattering and aggregate communities of Jews is known as the Jews' diaspora.
What happened?
After the death of King Solomon, third king of the Israelite tribes, the nation split into the northern kingdom of Israel, which consists of 10 tribes, and southern kingdom of Judah, which consists of tribes of Judah and Benjamin. Life was a constant struggle for these small kingdoms caught between massive neighboring empires like Assyria and Babylon. In 722 BCE, the Assyrian Empire conquered the kingdom of Israel and deported a significant portion of the population to Mesopotamia. These people became known as the 10 Lost Tribes. Then in 605 BCE, the kingdom of Judah fell to the Babylonians, leading to the destruction of Jerusalem and the first temple in 586 BCE, and the exile of the elite and much of the population to Babylon in several waves between 597 and 582 BCE.
Why are they called the 10 Lost Tribes?
The Assyrians had systematically moved populations across their vast territory in order to stabilize their empire, maximize economic output, and erase the local identities that fueled rebellions. By mixing different peoples together in new regions, the Assyrians aimed to create a more uniform, compliant population that identified as Assyrian rather than their original cultures. The 10 northern tribes likely intermarried and gradually assimilated into the local populations of their new homes in the Assyrian Empire.
How about the Jews in Kingdom of Judah? Did they survive from the exile?
When the Persian Empire conquered Babylon, King Cyrus the Great allowed Jews to return to Jerusalem. However, many stayed in Mesopotamia. As trade routes expanded under the Greek and later Roman empires, Jews moved to Egypt, Greece, and even Rome. Back in Jerusalem, the Jews managed to rebuild the Second Temple. However, in 63 BCE, the Roman general Pompey the Great captured Jerusalem. In the beginning, the Romans treated the Jewish people with respect and accommodation, but relations severely deteriorated as direct Roman rule in Jerusalem became increasingly oppressive under later, less sympathetic governors and emperors. Eventually, it reached a breaking point, igniting the first Jewish revolt in 66 CE. When the Roman legions were dispatched to crush the uprising, they destroyed Jerusalem and the Second Temple in 70 CE. After brutally suppressing subsequent rebellions, the Romans banned Jews from living in Jerusalem and began formally dispersing them across the empire. Over the centuries, these exiled communities established roots in southern Europe, such as Spain, Italy, and France, and gradually expanded into Central and Eastern Europe, including Germany, Poland, and Russia.
How did they avoid the same fate as the 10 lost tribes?
The Promised Land became their ultimate survival mechanism. Even after living in foreign lands for 2,000 years, the Jews maintained the deep belief that one day they would return to their homeland promised by God, a conviction that kept their national identity from dissolving across the centuries.
So, that's why the Zionists wanted to return.
Exactly. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the Zionists were appealing to European powers and later securing British support for Jewish migration to Palestine, believing that the Jews needed their own sovereign nation to escape rising anti-Semitism in Europe and that they were reclaiming their ancient heritage. In 1948, they succeeded in establishing the State of Israel. But this reclaiming came at a massive cost to the Palestinian population who had lived there for generations, leading to decades of displacement, conflict, and suffering.
That brings us back to the news I saw today. Now that the Jews are back to the Promised Land, some politicians want to rebuild the Third Temple. Is that a real goal?
In traditional Judaism, the reconstruction of the Third Temple awaits the Messianic Age, a future eternal period of time on earth in which the Messiah will arrive and bring universal peace and brotherhood without any evil. According to traditional belief, only the Messiah is able to reveal the exact location of the original Holy of Holies and guide the building process. For many, the Third Temple remains a spiritual, messianic dream and a symbol of peace. But for extremists, it serves as a volatile political target. Because the Third Temple must be built on the same site as the first and second Jewish temples, the Temple Mount, it places these ambitions in direct, physical conflict with the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which occupies the same grounds. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is regarded as one of the holiest sites in Islam, where Muslims believe the Prophet Muhammad traveled on a heavenly creature named Al-Buraq from the Kaaba in Mecca to the furthest mosque, widely understood as the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, before ascending to heaven, meeting with previous prophets, speaking directly with God, and returning to Mecca before dawn.
So they're turning a religious symbol into a battlefield?
They are certainly taking an ancient, symbolic promise and trying to manifest it in the real world, regardless of the political cost. It's a striking example of how ancient texts and beliefs can be weaponized in modern geopolitics. When you see headlines like that, Mia, remember, the Promised Land isn't just a map. It's a story that has saved a people from extinction. However, when it's treated as a modern legal deed, it becomes a blueprint for conflict. Understanding the difference between the spiritual history and the political ambition is the only way to make sense of what you're reading.
Thanks for explaining that, Grandpa. Can I ask you another question?